Hello YouTube. Welcome to Secret Fact. Case study of Spanish flu. 1. What is the flu? 2. Flu season. 3. Spanish flu symptoms. 4. What caused the Spanish flu? 5. Why was the Spanish flu called the Spanish flu? 6. Where did the Spanish flu come from? 7. Fighting the Spanish flu. 8. Aspirin poisoning and the flu. 9. The flu takes heavy toll on society. 10. How U.S. cities tried to stop the 1918 flu pandemic. 11. Spanish flu pandemic ends. 12. Sources.
Over the edge, feel like I'm floating through.
Introduction. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, the deadliest in history, infected an estimated 500 million people worldwide, about 1/3 of the planet's population, and killed an estimated 20 million to 50 million victims, including some 675,000 Americans. The 1918 flu was first observed in Europe, the United States and parts of Asia before swiftly spreading around the world. At the time, there were no effective drugs or vaccines to treat this killer flu strain. Citizens were ordered to wear masks, schools, theaters and businesses were shuttered, and bodies piled up in makeshift morgues before the virus ended its deadly global march. 1. What is the flu? Influenza, or flu, is a virus that attacks the respiratory system. The flu virus is highly contagious. When an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, respiratory droplets are generated and transmitted into the air, and can be inhaled by anyone nearby. Additionally, a person who touches something with the virus on it and then touches his or her mouth, eyes, or nose can become infected. 2. Flu season. In the United States, flu season generally runs from late fall into spring. In a typical year, more than 200,000 Americans are hospitalized for flu-related complications, and over the past 3 decades, there have been some 3,000 to 49,000 flu-related U.S. deaths annually, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Young children, people over age 65, pregnant women and people with certain medical conditions, such as asthma, diabetes, or heart disease, face a higher risk of flu-related complications, including pneumonia, ear and sinus infections and bronchitis. 3. Spanish flu symptoms. The first wave of the 1918 pandemic occurred in the spring and was generally mild. The sick, who experienced such typical flu symptoms as chills, fever and fatigue, usually recovered after several days, and the number of reported deaths was low. However, a second, highly contagious wave of influenza appeared with a vengeance in the fall of that same year. Victims died within hours or days of developing symptoms, their skin turning blue and their lungs filling with fluid that caused them to suffocate. In just 1 year, 1918, the average life expectancy in America plummeted by a dozen years. 4. What caused the Spanish flu? It's unknown exactly where the particular strain of influenza that caused the pandemic came from. However, the 1918 flu was first observed in Europe, America, and areas of Asia before spreading to almost every other part of the planet within a matter of months. Despite the fact that the 1918 flu wasn't isolated to one place, it became known around the world as the Spanish flu, as Spain was hit hard by the disease and was not subject to the wartime news blackouts that affected other European countries. Even Spain's king, Alfonso XIII, reportedly contracted the flu. 5. Why was the Spanish flu called the Spanish flu? The Spanish flu did not originate in Spain, though news coverage of it did. During World War I, Spain was a neutral country with a free media that covered the outbreak from the start, first reporting on it in Madrid in late May of 1918. Meanwhile, Allied countries and the Central Powers had wartime censors who covered up news of the flu to keep morale high. Because Spanish news sources were the only ones reporting on the flu, many believed it originated there. The Spanish, meanwhile, believed the virus came from France and called it the French flu. 6. Where did the Spanish flu come from? Scientists still do not know for sure where the Spanish flu originated, though theories point to France, China, Britain, or the United States, where the first known case was reported at Camp Funston in Fort Riley, Kansas, on March 11, 1918. Some believe infected soldiers spread the disease to other military camps across the country, then brought it overseas. In March 1918, 84,000 American soldiers headed across the Atlantic and were followed by 118,000 more the following month. 7. Fighting the Spanish flu. When the 1918 flu hit, doctors and scientists were unsure what caused it or how to treat it. Unlike today, there were no effective vaccines or antivirals, drugs that treat the flu. The first licensed flu vaccine appeared in America in the 1940s. By the following decade, vaccine manufacturers could routinely produce vaccines that would help control and prevent future pandemics. Complicating matters was the fact that World War I had left parts of America with a shortage of physicians and other health workers. And of the available medical personnel in the U.S., many came down with the flu themselves. 8. Aspirin poisoning and the flu. With no cure for the flu, many doctors prescribed medication that they felt would alleviate symptoms, including aspirin, which had been trademarked by Bayer in 1899, a patent that expired in 1917, meaning new companies were able to produce the drug during the Spanish flu epidemic. 9. Spanish flu pandemic ends. By the summer of 1919, the flu pandemic came to an end, as those that were infected either died or developed immunity. Almost 90 years later, in 2008, researchers announced they'd discovered what made the 1918 flu so deadly. A group of 3 genes enabled the virus to weaken a victim's bronchial tubes and lungs and clear the way for bacterial pneumonia. Since 1918, there have been several other influenza pandemics, although none as deadly. A flu pandemic from 1957 to 1958 killed around 2 million people worldwide, including some 70,000 people in the United States, and a pandemic from 1968 to 1969 killed approximately 1 million people, including some 34,000 Americans. More than 12,000 Americans perished during the H1N1, or swine flu, pandemic that occurred from 2009 to 2010. The novel coronavirus pandemic of 2020 is spreading around the world as countries race to find a cure for COVID-19 and citizens shelter in place in an attempt to avoid spreading the disease, which is particularly deadly because many carriers are asymptomatic for days before realizing they are infected. Before the spike in deaths attributed to the Spanish flu in 1918, the U.S. Surgeon General, Navy, and the Journal of the American Medical Association had all recommended the use of aspirin. 9. The flu takes heavy toll on society. The flu took a heavy human toll, wiping out entire families and leaving countless widows and orphans in its wake. Funeral parlors were overwhelmed and bodies piled up. Many people had to dig graves for their own family members. 10. How U.S. cities tried to stop the 1918 flu pandemic. The flu was also detrimental to the economy. In the United States, businesses were forced to shut down because so many employees were sick. Basic services such as mail delivery and garbage collection were hindered due to flu-stricken workers. 11. Sources. Salicylates and pandemic influenza mortality, 1918-1919 pharmacology, pathology, and historic evidence. Clinical infectious diseases. If you want to know amazing facts and history about world's biggest coronavirus, want to know about coronavirus, all information link in the description or click on the I button. If you new in this channel, see others video also.